He never expected to see his employee stealing. He never expected to see a man who worked quietly, never missed a day, barely spoke, suddenly slipping money from an unlocked drawer inside the office. And yet, that's exactly what Samuel Lawrence, the 48-year-old millionaire CEO of Lawrence Tech Industries, saw late one rainy evening. The security cameras didn't catch it, but Samuel did, and his world froze in a single stunned heartbeat. Daniel Hayes, a humbly dressed technician who kept his head low and his hours long, had taken money, only $20, and tucked it nervously into his pocket like a man stealing to survive, not for greed. Samuel had built his empire with discipline and integrity. He despised dishonesty more than failure, and that night, as Daniel slipped away into the dark drizzle outside the building, Samuel followed him quietly, unable to understand why a hard-working, seemingly decent man would risk everything for only $20. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of doing good even when no one notices, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone, and subscribe to our channel to support inspiring stories like this. Samuel drove slowly behind Daniel's worn-out bicycle, watching the young man's rain-soaked shirt cling to his thin frame. Daniel didn't stop anywhere nice. He traveled through dim streets, past broken sidewalks, avoiding busy areas with a sense of urgency. He reached a small bakery that was about to close, parked his bicycle, and rushed inside. From the window of his car, Samuel watched him buy a plastic bag of bread. Nothing more. No snacks, no drinks, nothing for himself. Just bread. Cheap, simple, necessary. It didn't explain anything. Why would a man steal money to buy a few pieces of bread? Why not just ask for help? Why not request an advance on salary? Samuel didn't know whether to feel anger or sympathy, but he followed again as Daniel continued riding. Through the night until he arrived at a deteriorating building in one of the poorest parts of the city. Faded paint, cracked windows, broken stairs. Samuel parked at a distance, keeping himself unseen. Daniel rushed inside, two small shadows running toward him, and suddenly everything shifted. Samuel saw two children, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, barefoot, clothes worn and visibly patched. They hugged Daniel tightly, as if waiting all day for him. He handed them the bread, and they devoured it immediately with the frantic hunger of kids who hadn't eaten enough. There was no celebration of a treat, no joy of a surprise, only relief, pure relief. The millionaire sat in his car, rain streaking the windshield, watching a reality unlike anything he'd known. His world was clean offices, elegant restaurants, expensive realities. He had forgotten what hunger looked like, forgotten what desperation shaped. He saw Daniel kneel to wipe crumbs off one child's cheek, then sit quietly with them as the bread disappeared in minutes. The small room behind them was nearly empty. No fridge, no microwave, no furniture except a mattress on the floor covered with thin blankets. Through the open door, he also noticed medication bottles stacked on a shelf, many of them unopened or expired. Something was wrong, something deeper than poverty. Samuel left that night without confronting the young father. His anger had dissolved into something heavier, something painful, something close to shame. He returned to his estate, sat in silence at the edge of his vast living room, and stared at the luxurious space around him, marble floors, grand windows, imported art. A house cleaner came to ask if he needed anything, and for the first time in years he felt embarrassed by the life around him. He didn't feel guilty for success, only for how far he'd allowed himself to drift from the fragile world of those who struggled silently. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work. Exactly on time, just like always. He looked tired, his hair uncombed, his clothes still damp from last night's rain as if he had no other shirt to change into. He worked quietly, eyes down, avoiding everyone. Samuel watched him from afar, for hours. He watched the way Daniel shared part of his lunch with a janitor who forgot his meal. He watched him fix other employees' equipment problems without asking for credit. He watched a man who seemed to give more than he ever took. And Samuel wondered, painfully, how much this man must sacrifice just to stay afloat at noon. Samuel finally called him into his office. Daniel walked in anxiously, as if expecting to be fired even before hearing a word. Samuel took a long breath, studied the pale young face across the desk, and spoke with an unexpectedly heavy voice. He didn't accuse him of theft. He didn't mention cameras or what he'd seen. He simply asked if he was okay. Daniel froze. No one asked him that. No employer, no neighbor, no stranger. He didn't answer at first. Then his eyes filled with silent panic, like someone afraid of losing everything if he spoke the truth. In a calm voice, Samuel asked if he had family. That question made Daniel's shoulders collapse. He explained, slowly and reluctantly, that he had two nieces, not daughters. Their mother, his sister, had died of a heart condition 6 months ago. He was raising them alone, working 2 jobs, selling old electronics online, anything he could do. His salary barely covered rent and utilities. The younger girl had asthma and needed medication every month, but health insurance didn't fully cover it. He tried to balance everything: rent, school, medicine, food. And sometimes there just wasn't enough. He said he hated himself for slipping that $20 bill. He planned to replace it next payday. He cried quietly, not defensively, not dramatically, just like someone who had run out of options, excuses, and strength. Samuel felt a weight in his chest so unusual and so intense that he had to look away. He had gone to confront a thief, only to meet a broken protector doing everything he could. He told Daniel that honesty mattered, but so did compassion. He spoke gently, as though speaking to his younger self. Then, without ceremony, he offered a pay raise, not as charity, but as recognition of valuable work. He also gave him an opportunity for extra overtime that paid significantly more. Finally, he offered health insurance upgrades that would fully cover his niece's medication. Daniel was overwhelmed, shaking, unable to comprehend so much kindness. But Samuel wasn't done. He called his property manager privately, arranged a better apartment for Daniel and the girls, closer to work and with subsidized rent. All paperwork done anonymously. No credit to Samuel, no attention. It would simply be his quiet intervention, a silent gesture repaying the world he once came from. Yes, he too had grown up poor. He too had watched someone he loved die because they couldn't afford medicine. He too had known the difference a single helping hand could make. His wealth wasn't built to only elevate him. He had forgotten that. This young man reminded him why he once dreamed of success, to make life better not just for himself but for others. Weeks passed, and everything began to change. Daniel worked harder, smiled more, and no longer appeared hollow with stress. His nieces began to look healthier, happier, always hugging their uncle after work when he picked them up from school. The new apartment allowed them a sense of dignity. They had a fridge now, a couch, proper beds, and every time he brought home groceries, his eyes still held gratitude, as if he could never take anything for granted again. Samuel never bragged about helping him, never exposed his struggle to others. He simply visited them sometimes, always pretending he happened to be nearby, always bringing something extra he didn't need: books for the girls, toys that looked like gifts from a distant uncle, or meals he claimed were leftovers from meetings. He grew attached to the girls in a gentle, respectful way, like a man learning what innocence looked like again. The girls adored him, not because he was rich, but because he listened to them, remembered their preferences, and treated them like they mattered. Samuel found himself looking forward to those visits more than business deals, charity galas, or the praise of investors. The more he helped, the more he healed something inside himself, something that grief had scarred years ago. Months later, on the anniversary of Daniel's sister's death, Samuel visited the small graveyard with him and the children. No grand speeches, no announcements. He simply stood beside them in silence, hands folded, heart heavy, sharing their pain without words. The wind that day seemed softer, almost respectful. They placed flowers on her grave. The younger niece cried quietly. Daniel looked stronger but still vulnerable. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder, offering not money, not solutions, but presence, a rare currency many wealthy people forget to give. If this story has moved you, if it has reminded you of the power of compassion or the quiet battles hidden behind ordinary lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel to support meaningful content that touches hearts. Later that evening, as they all sat in the apartment eating a simple dinner together, the youngest niece suddenly asked if Mr. Samuel could be their uncle from now on. The room froze for a moment. Daniel looked embarrassed, unsure, emotional. Samuel smiled slowly, eyes wet with a feeling he hadn't felt in decades. He nodded, not as a millionaire, not as a boss, but as a man who understood what family meant beyond blood, beyond titles, beyond wealth. The little girl giggled and hugged him. And in that moment Samuel realized that sometimes the greatest investment a man can make isn't in stocks or business strategies, but in lives that desperately need compassion. Special request, before we end, comment below with one line: kindness matters. Let's fill the world with hope, one story at a time. And so ended a journey that began with suspicion and anger, but turned into something pure. The millionaire learned that true wealth isn't measured by numbers or possessions, but by the lives we uplift and the love we choose to give. He didn't just save a man from poverty, he saved himself from a life of loneliness, from forgetting where he came from, and from losing what it truly means to be human. And that's how a millionaire who followed his employee found not a thief to punish, but a family to protect.